Joe Casey with Casey Aviation here on the Malibu Guru podcast. And man, we are doing something kind of fun and crazy and sort of interesting in the sense that we're going to do a remote podcast. We do all of our stuff from inside of our studio. But we really wanted the ability to do it from afar. And I've got a guy from afar. And I've got Dan the Diamond Man here and Dan Moran. Hey, welcome to the Malibu Guru podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Joe. I'm glad to be here.
Hey, this is a bunch of fun, not only because it's our first time to really do a remote, and you are really remote. I mean, right now, obviously, you're in your car. Your car's getting like powered up at a power station, sort of thing.
That's literally charging my car in the background. If I have
Yeah.
to move at some point to get it off the charger, I'll let you know.
10 years ago, if somebody would have listened to this podcast, they wouldn't have a clue. You're doing a remote podcast in a car while it's getting charged. Oh, anyway, it's kind of
We live in the
crazy.
future,
It's a crazy world we live in now.
for sure.
Hey, listen, but what I want to talk about, you've got your JetPROP that you just purchased recently, and
Right.
made kind of a what I would call a pretty big step up. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that move up you had. I'm going to talk about your past. I want to talk about aviation. I want to talk about why you moved where you're at. So if you don't mind, let's dive into. And I called you Dan the Diamond Man. That's what we've been calling you. Have you been called that before?
I get that a lot. Yeah.
It sort of works because what you do in life, you're the guy that sells diamonds. Am I right?
I'm in the diamond business, diamonds and fine jewelry. I import diamonds from overseas. I manufacture custom jewelry, mostly rings, but everything in the world of jewelry. And I work with private clients all over the world. And that's actually one of the things that got me into aviation.
Yeah, yeah. The aviation was able to get your face before somebody in a different place that helped you get the right diamonds, and it's been a good thing for you, correct?
Yeah, it's one of the things that's really set me apart in my business is I can say to a client, "Oh, you're in San Jose. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll jump in the plane. I'll shoot up there tomorrow. We'll look at some stones together." And not only does it enable me to get to see people that I wouldn't get to see any other way, but also for the client who typically is not an aviation person, there's a big sexy factor when you say, "Hey, I'll meet you at the FBO, and I've got a conference room booked." Um, they really get an experience of, "Oh wow, I'm on the airfield and I've never done anything like this before," and then they get a story to tell their friends. My jeweler flew to see me, so it becomes
Right.
a part of the experience. So they benefit from it. I certainly benefit from it, both because I get to do the business and because I get to go flying at work, which is a great way to merge two things that mean a lot to me.
That's right. I used to work weirdly. I was a military pilot and then an airline pilot, and then I became a flying salesman. And while I was for a paint company of all things, but I tell you what, it was so because we sold paint to these basically these manufacturers of other goods. But we told the people, because the paint was always the last step of their manufacturing process. And
I
we told them, the airplane basically was if you have a problem on your line and there was a problem with the paint, I'm just an hour or two away to be able to get there. And that did happen. There were times where we were, they had a problem and I said, I'll see you in an hour. And we got there and fixed the problem. Everything went really well. So aviation it's a time machine. And not
It
only
is a
that,
time machine.
it's a time machine, but it's also a little bit of a sexy time machine in the sense that when somebody knows that you've got some skills and capability to be able to get somewhere, there's an impact. It works. It's cool.
It does. It's a thing. It's a whole thing. I remember one day about 2 years ago, I had 5 different appointments in 5 different cities with 5 different clients, all around the Bay Area. I don't know how well you know the Bay Area, but my home base is in Southern California. So from SoCal up to, it was Hayward to Half Moon Bay to Oakland to San Jose, back to Hayward, and then home, all in one day. 5 appointments, 5 rings. Show me another way to do that. It's just not possible without general aviation.
That's right. That's right. And especially to actually for them to hold the rock or for you to see the diamond or to be able
Right.
to really make a good presentation. It's everything.
Right. There's some things that, even with all the technology in the world, we still can't do remotely. And
Yeah.
looking at a diamond and appreciating its character, yeah, we do stuff with pictures and videos, but there's no substitute for seeing the real thing. And the airplane lets me bring that to people.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So let's talk. When did you first get it? When was your first flight? Like, I'm going to learn how to fly. When
On
did
it.
it all
So
start?
I was one of those kids who would always point at the sky and go airplane, and like I was always into it. Um, and I came into aviation through, I used to ride motorcycles pretty enthusiastically. And I met up with a bunch of guys who are all riders. And it turns out there's an awful lot of overlap between people who ride motorcycles and people who fly airplanes. It's that
Definitely.
same sensation of leaning to turn and people. So it tends to attract the same kind of guy. And so I got hooked up with these guys who are all pilots. And they had a $100 hamburger Friday lunch table that they did every week. They would fly to this airport that has the best, it's probably the best $100 hamburger in Southern California. We'd have lunch and fly back. So they flew me as a passenger a few times. And at some point they started saying, so are you going to do this thing or what? And I said, you know what? If I wait until I have enough money or enough free time, I never will. Just do it. So I started taking flight lessons and I was instantly hooked.
That's great. That's awesome. And as you progressed, you got your private license. I assume you
Right.
got an instrument rating somewhere real soon along the way. And then
Mm-hmm.
you got into aircraft ownership. What was your
Right.
first? What was your
Yeah,
first airplane?
so I did my first couple hundred hours in Cessnas, 172s, 182s. And then I actually bought an experimental airplane called the Sling 4, my first airplane. I did my instrument rating in that airplane. It's a South African made 4-seat experimental. Uh, Great little airplane. I flew that for about 200 or 300 hours. And
Yeah.
then Sling, who, as it happens, their U.S. headquarters is my home airport of Torrance, California. So I knew those guys really, really well because I'd see them on the field. And anyway, I heard a rumor that a new and improved version of the Sling 4 was coming out. And I said, sign me up, I'll take the first one. So they sold my first Sling, and I bought what was called the Sling TSI, which is the upgraded version. And I bought that 5 years ago and flew that around for about another 800 hours or so. And that's what I was flying when you and I first started talking now about a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And it is kind of interesting. Is there's a lesser known airplane. It's not your mainstream
Right.
bird, if you want to think about that. And you eventually went to a JetPROP, which the JetPROP's not your mainstream bird either. So
True. True.
is there a little thing in you of, I don't know, where you want to be either on the cutting edge or you want to be on the edge of finding something new and interesting, and being on the edge is okay with you?
I mean, I think that's part of it. The other thing is I'm a very efficiency minded guy.
There
One of
you
the
go.
things that I
There you
love
go.
about the Sling is a super efficient airplane. You know, it's 4 seats, 1,000-pound useful load, cruising at 155 knots on 10 gallons an hour. That's a
Right.
great combo, right? So I love that. But it's there came a time, I remember actually you said to me, Joe, when we first started talking, he said, you know, you said there's two kinds of guys who buy PA-46. It's either somebody who's in his 60s and has had a great career and says, I've arrived and I can swing it, I can write the check. Or it's a guy in his 40s who had a scary experience in a less capable airplane. And now is to move up. And I was that guy. But
Yeah.
as much as the Sling is a fantastic airplane, its capabilities are much more limited than a jet prop. So, you know, it doesn't have FICI, it doesn't have pressurization, it doesn't have all these safety features
Right.
that it turns out were important to me. And I found myself in a pretty scary flight and saying to myself, gosh, you know, I don't know if I can afford this upgrade in my mind, but can I afford not to do it? And it came to the point where I said, I either have to limit my missions or I have to get into a more capable airplane. And I didn't want to limit my missions, and so here we are.
Okay, so when I remember our talks and you asking the questions and me telling you, you know, you're going to burn this much gallons per hour and this much, the cost is going to be about like this, and the airplane will do this, and you're going to like pressurization, blah, blah, blah. All these different things that are fairly typical conversations with people wanting to get into the turbine. I
Sure.
sensed a little bit of I'm not sure I believe you completely, Joe. I'm anxious to see this, if this is really going to play out like you
Sure.
said.
Sure.
Okay,
I mean, the
so
numbers on a jet prop are so good that it's hard to believe that it can really, you know, it's not that I didn't believe you. It was like, wow, that sounds almost too good to be true.
right, exactly. And I remember telling you, this airplane's going to burn. It's going to be efficient. It's going to go up high. It's going to cruise well. You're going to have a great dispatch reliability. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
gain great confidence in the engine. Um, has your belief in the piston side, and as you've converted over to the turbine, has it rung true? Has it been a good experience for you in terms of engine reliability and performance and pressurization? Is there a place in there that you're like, no, you kind of lied, Joe, or you kind of you didn't you sold a bill of goods?
Now, if anything, you undersold it.
Okay.
The airplane. I mean, look, I've only had possession of the airplane for 3 months or so now. My
Yeah.
first flight with Deanna over there at Lufkin was March 4th, and today is June 29th, so almost 4 months.
Yeah.
But so far, there has never been a moment where I hit that starter switch and the plane didn't fire right up.
Exactly.
There's never been a moment where I needed something to work and it wasn't there for me. There have been a few moments where I found myself going, okay, where's that switch and where's that lever? But once I knew what to do, the airplane is happy to do it.
Right. Okay.
And
So has there been a time where you've flown a flight that you would have never flown in the Sling? And tell me, I know there has been. Tell me a flight that just kind of describe what went down there where you thought to yourself, I would never do this in a Sling. I would have never flown it, or the mission's completely different because I have a jet prop. I did it, and it was comfortable. It's better. Relate a story.
sure. And it happened actually a couple of weeks after I took the Sling home. So I live in Southern California. I trained with Deanna in Texas, and then flew it back to SoCal. And then a few weeks after that, I had a client I wanted to meet with in Scottsdale, Arizona, and this was in late March. And the weather was looking really sketchy in Scottsdale that day. You know, you think of Arizona as being palm trees and 100-degree weather, but on that day there was a winter storm. It was maybe low 50s to high 50s on the ground, and icing all over the place in the forecast. You know, anywhere between 8,000 and 18,000 feet.
Right.
And I called you before the trip and I said, Joe, you know, I planned this trip. I'm looking at the weather. Man, I don't know about this. And you said to me, Dan, take the flight. I want you to see how much of a non-event that is in the JetPROP. So I flew, I took a pilot buddy of mine with me just so that I'd have a backup. Um, you know, if his workload got heavy, and he and I flew to Scottsdale. And yeah, there was a lot of ice, and you know, you're looking out the window and you're watching a little bit of ice build up on the wing, and hit that button, ice is gone. You know, you have all your systems on, and you're watching them work, and you're going, wow, you know, the plane actually tolerates this pretty well. And you know, we were bumping around a little bit because you know it's a storm after all, but nothing like what it would have been in the Sling, right? The jet prop is probably triple the weight of the Sling, and the big long wing, and it's dramatically more stable. The Sling is a go-kart. The jet prop is a limo. So it's just a
Yeah.
different experience flying it. And I remember talking to my buddy and saying, wow, this would have been, had I been foolish enough to attempt this in the Sling, this would have been a crash. This would have been, I'm pulling the chute.
Yeah.
But as it is, it's another day at the office, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
even
Right.
another fact, just on Monday, I just dropped off the airplane less than a week ago with Kevin Mead for its first annual under my stewardship. And flying out of Colorado Springs on Monday afternoon, there was all kinds of stuff in the forecast. You know, freezing rain over here and microbursts over there. And because the airplane is so capable and you have such a good weather picture, I was easily able to avoid the stuff that wasn't a problem, climbed up over the rest of it. And up at 270, the weather was beautiful.
Right.
So had I been in the Sling, I'm staying in Colorado Springs. I'm not moving. But in the jet prop, here we are.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a capable airplane. And so a lot of people don't, or they underestimate the benefit of moving from a piston to a turbine and non-pressurization to pressurization
Yeah.
and shorter range to longer range and being able to get up high versus staying down low and turbine ability for climb rates and things of this nature. It's a lot of people don't. They get in there and they go, I don't know if I believe all of that, and they kind of stay where they're at. But some people like you make the move and basically say, I don't know everything about what I'm about to do, but I've heard it's good, and so it's good for people to hear the word that you're saying that, hey, I used to fly that, now I fly this, and this is better.
I mean, look, at this point, I still own the Sling. It's for sale, and I think it's going to be under contract on Monday. But for now, I still own it. since taking delivery of the JetPROP, I have not been tempted to get in the Sling instead.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there
You know,
isn't any that the Sling does other than maybe landing on real short strips, which the JetPROP will get there, but I'm not ready yet. Other than that, there just isn't anything that tempts me to go back.
okay, so talk to me about how, like, you've owned the airplane for effectively almost 4 months.
Mhm.
How many hours have you flown?
About 85.
Golly. Okay,
Oh,
so
I'm putting it to
you,
work.
but what it really needs is that the capability of the airplane is increased, and so it's allowed you to do missions that you couldn't do, or an expanded role of missions, and therefore you're flying it more. Am I saying that
That's
right?
right. That's right. And I'm looking how can I incorporate it into things that I'm doing. I had a business slash family trip in April. We went to Chicago and back, and that's not something, could you do it in the Sling? I mean, I guess, but it would have been,
A
15
disaster.
hours of flight each way and stopping here, stopping there. You're not getting anywhere. As it was
Right.
in the JetPROP, we stopped where we wanted to stop. So, you know, and we went and saw the eclipse, which was amazing, and went hiking in Moab and did the kind of trip that without general aviation, you're just not doing it. And without something
Yeah.
like the JetPROP, it's just not practical. But in the JetPROP, easy peasy. And one of the other big benefits for me of this step up is my wife is a somewhat nervous passenger, and I have two boys, and one of them is a little bit more of a nervous passenger. I have one boy who's in flight training and has almost 100 hours of his own at 14 years old, and then I have another kiddo who's a little bit nervous. And both my wife and my nervous son are happy to get in the JetPROP. When I asked Jill, my wife, after this big Chicago trip, um, what did you think of the JetPROP versus the Sling? And she said, the Sling was a roller coaster for me, and this is transportation. I don't think about
Right.
it. She sits in the back. She asks me to turn off the ATC and stuff. She doesn't want to hear the radios. She wants to be on Delta, right? And read her magazine and let me know when we're there. And
Right.
so for her in the JetPROP, she can do that.
Right.
And
And
that's everything.
do you classify that as the idea that it's cabin class, or do
That's
you
right.
say, or is it a quieter experience, smoother experience?
It's the lack of vibration. It's the fact that it's quiet. Headsets are optional in the back, right? I don't know if that's true in the piston PA-46, but certainly in the turbine it is.
Yeah.
It's way, way less vulnerable to turbulence. That's the biggest thing. In
Right.
the Sling weighs 1,300 pounds. So every little bump, in this
Yeah.
thing, you kind of chop through that. And, my wife is the kind of passenger who's literally going, ah, when there's turbulence, and it just doesn't happen. And even on bumpy days, I can say to her with a straight face, hey, the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes might be bumpy, but once we're up at altitude, you're going to be fine. And I mean, the proof's in the pudding. She'll get in the airplane, but she was really reluctant to do in the Sling. And as anybody who's done any flying at all and has a family knows, if your family's willing to get in and happy to get in, you're going to use the airplane a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% as far as that's concerned. Let's talk about your Dash 21 engine. I will tell you, you picked up this airplane from just a clock. I'll tell you, the airplane you have was first bought by some people over in College Station. I call them the College Trio, and
Right.
basically went through about 3 or 4 different people. And then a guy named Eric owned the airplane from College Station, and they're just that whole trio to quattro group of people. It's just singularly outstanding group of people. And I knew you had a good. When this airplane came available, and you were with us as a buyer agent, we were leading you to whatever is the right airplane. When this airplane came up, I came to you and said, "Hey, this one's in your wheelhouse. It's the right vintage of one. In other words, you were looking for a JetPROP that's affordable. It's not going to break the bank, wouldn't up in the 7 digits, but yet something that's going to get you pressurized and get around. The fact that this is I say older JetPROP, meaning that it's an earlier model and it has a Dash 21 engine, but still, this airplane flat out performs. It's got a great panel,
Right.
all the new stuff as far as that. On the Dash 21 engine, what are you actually? Talk to us about your performance numbers.
What
Which
am
are
I giving up? So For example, I got curious because I was flying with somebody who's considering a PA-46 on Monday from California to Colorado Springs. And I went in a ForeFlight and I mapped out that flight for my airplane. And then just for kicks, I mapped it out in a Meridian to see how different would that be. And on that 3 and change hour flight, it came out to a difference of 10 minutes.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. The difference between the Dash 21 and the Meridian, which is the Dash 42, was I think it was either 10 or 11 minutes. And so, does that matter? If you're a paramedic, maybe, but not if you're me. So I said to myself, what you're giving up is it's a little bit slower in cruise. I'm seeing 245, 247, 243, something like that in cruise typically. And over about 14, 15,000 feet, the climb rate starts to come down. So coming off the ground, I'm climbing at between 1,600 and 2,200 feet a minute in a cruise climb setting, not at best climb, like your nose is pointing at the sky. It's uncomfortable. So in a cruise climb, call it 2,000 feet a minute. And by the time you're in the 20s, I'm now climbing at 600 to 800 feet a minute. It's still fine. I'm told that the Dash 35 JetPROP will just keep on climbing at 2K a minute all the way up. So that's a difference of 4 or 5 minutes in the climb. So the JetPROP will the bigger JetPROP will outclimb it a little bit. But I'm just, how big a deal is that, right? Versus maybe 100K lower acquisition costs and lower maintenance costs. For me, as you said, I was a bit budget constrained. If I think for anybody stepping up into the turbine world for the first time, the scope of the checks you have to write can be a little bit daunting. And I'm certainly not the guy who just strokes a 7-figure check without thinking about it. I know those guys exist. I have friends who are those guys. I'm not that guy. I still work for a living, but at the same time, you can pretty much keep up with those guys in the Dash 21. And I really don't feel that I gave much up, if anything. I think the Dash 21 is a gem. I think if you're an efficiency-minded guy, yeah, you're giving up 15 or 20 knots, but you're also burning 10% less fuel. And your overhaul, your hot section, everything's going to be cheaper. And the availability of parts and everything is super duper there because every King Air has 2 of these mounted on it. And I struggled to see the downside. At the time, I was concerned about it, but
yeah, no, it's the Dash 21 is a great installation on this airplane. A lot of people have, I think it would be called numerical prejudice. I don't know, maybe that's the right one.
bias.
Yeah, bias. There you go. That sounds better. The idea being that, hey, there's a better number. It must be better. I want the better one. Well, no, hold on a second. Go back to that Dash 21 or go back to the earlier model or whatever. And what ends up happening on an airplane like yours, earlier model, is you get a really high useful load. You get a really fast airplane because it's lighter. You also get, with the Dash 21, you get the same performance as a Dash 35 as the 2 climb. But as they climb, they're going to hit an altitude where the Dash 21 is going to do less and the 35 is going to continue on. And then they'll continue, and the Dash 35 is going to beat it. The Meridian's going to beat it to a place, but not by much. Just like you said, it's a wonderfully efficient machine that puts you in a turbine, puts you cruising. I mean, again, 240 to 250, somewhere in that ballpark, depending upon your weight and temperature.
Right. I mean, for me, being able to go faster is great, and I love it, and I'm happy to have it. But my primary motivation for moving up from the Sling to the JetPROP was safety, reliability, capability. Speed was below those on the list, right? I wanted something safe, I wanted something reliable, and I wanted something weather capable. So, don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have the speed, and I'm still almost 100 knots faster than I was in the Sling. But the difference between cruising at 245 and 260, I mean, I'll take it, but it's just not that big a deal. The speed is nice, but I don't have Dash 35 envy at this point. Anything short of a TBM or something that's dramatically faster, what's the difference?
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to branch off into some weird stuff here just for fun.
Sure.
A lot of times there's people listening to this podcast, they're in a place where they want to get their wife an ice cream. A
Hmm.
typical person, I think, is going to the mall looking for the jewelry store. And I remember one time somebody told me that the two most overpriced things in the world are furniture from a furniture store, like a commodity, and jewelry from the mall is the place where you're getting the lowest quality for them paying the most, and there's the most
And
margin
that's,
out there. Okay,
yeah,
so let's
whatever
say
you
that.
do, don't go to the mall for jewelry. Please, please don't do that. Um,
Okay, so there's the question. How does somebody get a hold of you? Number one, to look at a good diamond, and number two, talk to us for just a second about in other words, if you go to somebody, I say like you, which is like you're getting a better diamond for the product because you're getting something that more exactly like
for
you
sure.
like and a better quality cut. Is that the deal?
Yeah. So the mall is going to be the lowest common denominator of jewelry. It's going to be those pieces are manufactured to a price point, not to a standard. So they're going to cut corners everywhere they can. Whereas if you look at a guy like me, I'm using much higher quality stones, certifications, all kinds of stuff that we can deep dive, and I can talk to you about what the difference is. But you're going to get way more ring for way less money working with a private dealer like me. I'll give you a for instance. A million years ago, an old buddy of mine from high school called me and he was getting engaged. And he had to buy a ring before she started the show, if you take my meaning. Um, and he was getting engaged to the daughter of one of the 100 wealthiest men in America, right? Who he had met. He's a physician, and she had been a patient, and he didn't even realize who she was. And they dated after he was treating her. And anyway, one thing led to another. He said, "Look, I'm a resident. I don't make much money yet. Her dad is a billionaire, and I don't want to look like a gold digger. I want to present something legit. And the ring that she's in love with is at Harry Winston for $85,000, and I just can't swing it." So I made him an identical ring. I mean, there was nothing about the design that was proprietary, simple design, but same diamond quality, same metal type, same everything the same for $32,000. So a third the price, right? And
Oh,
that wasn't me giving him a freebie. I still made my margin, right? So it, the difference in value that you can get is dramatic. And as for how to reach me, I'd love to always talk to any other pilots. My company's called Concierge Diamonds, so conciergediamonds.com. I'm there.
perfect.
I answer all the emails. Um,
Good. And if somebody wants to call you and talk about a jet prop, they'll probably get an earful, correct?
oh my gosh, you can't get me to shut up. I'm in love with this airplane. I know I'm still early on into my ownership, and somewhere in the back of my head, I'm a little nervous about the bill I'm going to get from Kevin Mead because it's my first one. But just because it's an unknown and you don't know what you don't know, but you're going to have a lot of trouble convincing me to go back.
Right. Exactly. I will tell you, I think Kevin Mead's just phenomenal. His shop is great. One of the there are other premier shops in this space, but that's one of them. And Kevin Mead's going to give you a list of items that are on your airplane. When you first get that list, you're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to get to the bottom of this because the bottom line is going to have a number." But the cool part is Kevin just gives you so much data. He finds all these things. But the other thing that I really respect about Kevin is his shop doesn't have a rate for an item that is charged. So let me give you an example. If you know you have to replace a tire, then a lot of
Mhm.
shops will charge, say it's this many hours, this much for the tire, and that's what it's going to cost. And then if you have to get your brakes worked on, well, then they're going to have the same thing. It's going to be this much per hour,
Right.
or this many hours for the job, and that much cost. And if you get brakes and a tire, they're going to charge you both, and that's it. Kevin
Right.
does a great job of jacking the airplane up one time, pulling the tire and the tube off, and charging you for what you actually did, not charging you, double whacking you, because you got he was able to double tap. And
Right. It goes
Kevin,
right back to a guy like me, efficiency, right? Let's be efficient, and
that's
he is.
exactly right. And
Yeah.
if you look at a jet prop with the idea of efficiency, this gallon of gas, I get that much speed or that much performance or that whatever the case may be. With Kevin, with the hourly rate that Kevin produces, he produces more with that hourly rate than other shops, in my opinion. Which is
Right.
just wonderful because I'll expect a big price at some or a big bill at some places, But with Kevin, it always seems like the bill is reasonable and good, and you know you're getting a good annual because you look at the list and there's a laundry list on there of things that he found. But a lot of those times he's able to fix it while he finds it. It's just a neat little tweak of a certain thing, and he is able to. It's not a big gigantic deal with Kevin, and
Right.
he just seems to be a shop that's able to keep the costs low. So even though he's very good, he's going to find it. I bet you're pleasantly surprised that you get a really good annual and you get a really good product. So
And
I'm
more than anything else, the peace of mind of knowing the best in the business has looked at it and says it's safe to put my family in there. That's what I care about more than anything else.
That's right. And I will tell you, a lot of times shops will boost their ego by finding stuff on an annual when the airplane was done in a different shop. And in other words, like they'd be able to say, well, look at all this crap we found on this airplane.
Right.
Look how bad that other shop is. Look how good we are. And I find that to be that happen a lot. And one of the good parts is that your airplane was at Kevin Mead's shop 2 years ago,
Right.
which means it's going back to the same shop here now. And I just got a feeling that you're going to come out good here. I don't know. I haven't opened up your airplanes. I'm just saying, once your airplane's been to a really good shop like Kevin Mead, I'm not going to name others because I'm just telling you today's the Kevin Mead day as far as that's concerned. It's a really good shop. You might find something that's expensive, but I doubt it. And meaning that you got a good airplane, you got an airplane that's doing good. And when you handed them the airplane, you didn't hand them an airplane that you knew was broken. You handed an airplane you just got through flying. And so,
Right.
Anyway, I think you're going to be smiling at the end of this. Just Kevin Mead's one of those really good shops.
I mean, I also smiled handing it to him because I had just flown from California to Kansas City in like 5.5 hours. And that's revelatory, right? The fact that I could do that in less than a day. And I knew that if I'd wanted to do one more hop, I'd be in New York and I've gone coast to coast. That's mind blowing for a guy who's used to putting around in a 141 horsepower Sling.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, we agree completely. It's I just bet. As a matter of fact, we're going to get a report from you after the annual, and because some people are going to listen to this and they're going to want to know what's going on. We're going to get a report from you to find out. Yeah. So it'll be that'll be a good thing for sure. All right. Dan Moran, Dan the Diamond Man. Thanks for joining the Malibu Guru podcast. Thank you for working with us in the acquisition and training and all of your JetPROP. And our team really thinks you're great.
Before I let you go, I just want to put in a plug for anybody listening. Joe helped me more than he had to in the acquisition. Really held my hand from the first time we spoke to me actually stroking a check was about 8 months. And
Yeah.
I never felt like anybody on you or anyone on your team was losing patience with me. I
No,
was
no.
it was nerve-wracking for a guy to make that kind of step, and you guys really understood it and appreciated it. I want to give shout out to Eric and Matt, who were both incredibly helpful. Eric worked with me a whole bunch. Matt worked with me when I was there training and helped me out a lot. Of course, I have to thank Deanna, who did my initial training. And guys, you fly with Deanna, you're flying with someone who just has this quiet confidence of there isn't anything you can do that's going to rattle me in this airplane. There's just, and so you feel as a student that you can try that silly thing because you're covered. Nothing, you have a safety net that was quite strong.
That's right.
Everybody on Joe's team, whether it was Stephanie, with everybody, just you've mentioned on your podcast before, all thoroughbreds. I can attest to that. So if you're on the fence about buying a PA-46, do it. If you're on the fence about working with Joe and his team, do it. Do it. It's worth the money. Do it.
Cool. All right, Dan the Diamond Man. Thanks for joining the Malibu Guru podcast, and we look for the next report.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'll circle back when I get it.